This is where Hamas manufactured the October 7th massacre. Hidden deep underground beneath the feet of unsuspecting, innocent refugees, Hamas secretly built the largest and most complex weapon manufacturing facility the Israeli military has ever encountered. But what exactly did the Israelis discover, and what does its destruction mean for the course of the war in Gaza? During the first week of 2024, Israeli troops were busy continuing their fight against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. As clearing operations continued in Gaza City and Han Yunis, Israeli troops began their offensive in central Gaza. During the fighting, Israeli troops fought numerous pitched battles against Hamas forces centered around the Barej refugee camp. After several weeks of hard fighting, the IDF retook control of the area and began trying to locate tunnel entrances. But when they started interviewing locals, they discovered something was different about this area. Israeli troops heard rumors from local Palestinians that Hamas had an underground weapons facility in the area. Building weapons underground is characteristic of Hamas, so it came as no surprise that they were doing it here too. In accordance with protocol, Israeli troops began investigating abandoned civilian homes for tunnel entrances, since Hamas forces many civilians at gunpoint to build tunnels inside their homes. As Israeli troops searched houses along the Salah ad-Din highway just outside the camp, a squad of soldiers stumbled into a sparsely furnished house. Unlike many other houses still filled with personal effects and belongings, this house was void of everything except a few couches and chairs that looked more like a doctor's waiting room than a family home. Intrigued, the soldiers began moving the furniture around when they stumbled upon a secret door underneath one of the couches. Afraid of booby traps, the soldiers immediately called in combat engineers to investigate the tunnel entrance. After clearing it, the soldiers noticed something different about this tunnel. It was incredibly well built, with concrete walls, electric lighting, and full stairways instead of ladders, though they were not entirely sure where this weapons facility was or what it looked like. There was a good chance that it or something else important was down here, since Hamas clearly spent a lot of time on this tunnel. As Israeli troops began to clear the tunnel, what they discovered took the entire Israeli military by surprise. Inside the tunnels, troops began discovering workshop after workshop. Inside one, there might be a series of small foundries to make steel and then form them into castings. In another, there were chemicals and fertilizers strewn about that, when used for civilian purposes, was legitimate, but Hamas had imported them to turn them into homemade explosives. The steel was used inside other workshops to make rocket bodies, mortar shells, and rocket motors. What was surprising about the find was the number of weapons being made and how far the complex stretched. After searching other houses along the highway, the Israeli military found at least a dozen more tunnel entrances. These entrances all led to various parts of the facility. Inside, there were workshops to make rockets, explosives, mortars, and ammunition. There were storage facilities used to hold finished weapons until they could be sent to their final destination. There were also underground silos to directly fire rockets from the facility into Israel. In total, the factory stretched for about a mile underground. And that wasn't all. Though the factory was about 30 feet underground, another tunnel was beneath that. To reach it, Hamas built a fully functioning elevator that could fit many of its large rockets. This went down another 30 feet into a large tunnel that could send the weapons to other parts of Gaza. It was clear from the discovery that Hamas spent years building this facility, and it remains the largest weapons facility Israel has discovered to date. But how does Hamas get all this stuff in the first place? The fact that Hamas and its terrorist allies inside the Gaza Strip can obtain or produce such a wide range of weapons is not possible without outside help. However, because most of the Middle East shuns their brutal tactics, they have few friends to turn to. In fact, their only real friend besides the other terrorist groups is Iran. But how does Iran, on the other side of the Middle East, get weapons to Gaza? The journey for a bunch of weapons or their components destined for Hamas typically starts in Iran on a ship. These ships are usually registered under one of the various shell companies controlled by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the people in Iran that train and equip foreign terrorist groups. Once the ship leaves Iran, it usually goes to Sudan. After arriving in Sudan, Iranian forces have established an intricate network of smugglers that take the weapons from port in Sudan through the southern Egyptian desert, across the Suez, and into the Sinai Peninsula. Once in the Sinai, Bedouin smugglers work with Hamas to get the weapons into Gaza through their tunnels. Another way Iran sends weapons to Hamas is through Libya. Due to the constant conflict there, Libya is a hotspot of terrorism that Iran has also supported. Sometimes Iranian-flagged ships will go through the Suez Canal, dock in a Libyan port, and then truck the weapons through the vast western Egyptian desert instead. Iran is also known to fly shipments of arms to Syria, transfer the weapons to a Syrian government aircraft, fly it to Libya, and then send them via overland smuggling routes. However, the last way Iran smuggles weapons is arguably the most ingenious. Iranian ships leave the Suez Canal and head north towards Gaza. As these ships get close, Iranian troops store the weapons inside sealed metal containers as close to shore as possible. Hamas will then send divers to retrieve these weapons caches and bring them inside the strip. This route has been proven by Israel since one of Hamas's many tunnels actually stretches several dozen meters into the sea. This allows one of Hamas's several hundred divers to retrieve weapons, bring them into this underwater tunnel and into the strip unnoticed. But what kinds of weapons does Hamas acquire? An extensive review of photos and videos released by Hamas or captured by the Israelis shows that Hamas procures weapons from all over the world. Hamas carried a wide range of weapons that were mostly of Iranian, Chinese, or Russian origin. They have also obtained smaller quantities of arms from Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria and even North Korea. For their small arms, most rifles and machine guns are produced directly from Iran. These weapons are usually copies of Chinese weapons that had been copied from the Soviet Union. However, there have been a few notable examples recently. For example, Israeli forces uncovered a trove of Chinese small arms, including the QBC-97 assault rifle and the QLZ-87 automatic grenade launcher. The fact that Israel discovered these Chinese weapons for the first time raises questions about China's involvement in arming Hamas. Though China has exported these weapons to war zones in Sudan and Myanmar where they could have been sold on the black market, it is possible China sent them as direct aid or were purchased by Iran. Either way, this discovery demonstrates a high probability that Hamas is procuring small arms from other places besides just Iran. In addition to rifles and machine guns, Hamas fighters are well equipped with grenades, anti-tank mines, and RPG-type weapons. Of note, the RPGs that Hamas has been seen with are usually of Iranian origin, though there may have been numerous Bulgarian and North Korean models seen. What makes this weapon system so interesting is that Hamas produces its own tandem-shaped warheads that are based on Russian designs. These warheads are vital in neutralizing reactive armor on Israeli tanks. Besides the small arms Hamas fields, it also possesses a huge quantity of anti-tank weapon systems. These two are a mix of Iranian, North Korean, and Russian models, with some of the most common being from Russian Kornet and Konkur's anti-tank guided missiles. Thankfully, these are the only proven guided systems Hamas possesses. But they're not the only man-portable missile systems. Surprisingly, Hamas fighters filmed during the October 7th massacre sported several man-portable anti-air systems, including copies of Soviet Strela and Igla anti-air systems. But of course, the main power of Hamas resides in their rocket inventories. Estimates vary, but Hamas has about 30,000 missiles of varying quality and range at any given time. About 5,000 of these are considered medium range with a maximum effective range of about 50 kilometers. However, Hamas has several hundred missiles that can reach distances of over 100 kilometers, several examples of which were captured by the IDF during its raid on the Barej weapons factory. So, how does this stack up against the Israeli military? As experts have noted, it was not necessarily the capabilities of Hamas that surprised them in October, but the quantity of weaponry. In fact, many commentators argue that Hamas has equipped itself so well that its arsenal rivals that of many nation-states. But how does Hamas stack up against the Middle East's most powerful military? As far as individual weapons and equipment, Hamas foot soldiers and Israeli troops were near parity at the beginning of the conflict. The terrorists that invaded Israel were well equipped with small arms, ammunition, bulletproof vests, communications equipment, and medical supplies. Of course, these fighters were the best that Hamas had to offer, so most of Hamas likely didn't have the same level of equipment. Combined with the fact that after several months of fighting, the personal equipment of most Hamas fighters left has certainly been degraded. Additionally, with Hamas being under the pressure it is doubtful that they could get resupplied right now to replenish ammunition and equipment stocks, which means as the war goes on, individual Hamas terrorists become less and less capable. It should go without saying that Hamas is completely outmatched regarding armor and artillery. Though Hamas has a few technicals, which are civilian vehicles with mounted weapons, these were undoubtedly destroyed in the opening stages of the war. Not to mention, these unarmored vehicles were no match for Israeli tanks and armored vehicles. However, the anti-tank capabilities are impressive for a terrorist organization. Though the fog of war persists, video evidence shows Hamas has conducted dozens of attacks against Israeli armored formations with some success. It is clear that these hunter-killer teams are a concern for Israel since many Hamas anti-tank commanders are frequent targets of Israeli airstrikes. In addition to being outclassed by Israeli armor, Hamas cannot compete with Israeli artillery and their long-range fires. Though Hamas does possess an extensive rocket inventory and thousands of Russian and Iranian mortar systems, these are all unguided systems. Israel possessed a huge arsenal of guided munitions with much greater ranges and in more significant quantities. However, Hamas rocket and mortar inventories are sufficient for its needs to conduct strikes into Israel and harass Israeli troops. Surprisingly, one of the areas in which Hamas has really built up a capability has been its air warfare arm. Though the Israeli Air Force is unmatched, with the few manpad systems Hamas possesses being outdated and easily defeated, Hamas has built up a robust drone program. Thanks to the Iranian support, Hamas has numerous surveillance and armed drones in its inventory. While some of these were as simple as repurposed civilian quadcopters, Hamas does possess a limited number of suicide drones that they did launch into Israel during the opening salvos. Another surprising fact is that Hamas actually had a robust electronic warfare component, at least in the beginning. Inside Gaza City, in one of the main news stations, Hamas occupied the first 5 levels of the building. These terrorists had a number of signal collection antennae to swoop in on Israeli communications. Some of the antennas were also GPS jammers that Hamas hoped would throw precision munitions off course in the city. Lastly, Hamas was rumored then to have a computer server farm. The purpose of the farm was to collect data 24 hours a day from Israel, including intercepting telephone calls from Israeli citizens and collecting open-source intelligence to create intelligence reports for Hamas leadership. To date, this alleged server farm has yet to be found. But if it existed, it shows that Hamas has greatly improved its electronic warfare and intelligence capabilities, probably due to Iranian help. But with the weapons factory in Burej now out of commission, what does the future of warfare look like in Gaza? Thankfully for Israel, their efforts will likely hurt Hamas's capabilities for a long time. Though there are numerous smaller factories still in operation, these are getting shut down each day by the Israeli military. The Burej factory was the main factory Hamas created to build its arsenal and will hinder its ability to rebuild for years to come. However, this does not mean that Hamas capabilities are far from over. Recent media reports indicate that Israel admits that there are even more tunnels than previously thought. Previous estimates said that there were about 300 miles of tunnels, but the real number may be closer to 450 miles. With so many more unknown tunnels, there is high likelihood that there could be other weapons factories like the Burej one underneath the surface. But even if there are not, it is clear that Hamas is actively rebuilding its capabilities already to wage war. Just after the ground invasion started, Israeli troops captured documents from a Hamas commander that showed that he had just sent 7 more students to Iran to study engineering, physics, and aerodynamics. This is on top of 50 other students he had sent in the previous year. Hamas regularly relies on the Iranian military to fund scholarships for Palestinian students to attend legitimate universities in Iran. These students pursue degrees in engineering, computer science, chemistry, and other disciplines necessary for Hamas to create weapons. While in Iran, Revolutionary Guard Corps members instruct these students on how to create various types of weapons. Upon graduation, they return to the Gaza Strip to start creating weapons for Hamas. Because Hamas has been essentially setting conditions for a long-term defense industrial base, if Israel does not kill or capture these individuals, Hamas will have the knowledge to restart its weapons programs in the future. But does that mean that Israel cannot defeat Hamas? The destruction of the Berej factory is undoubtedly a critical blow to Hamas's ability to conduct its operations. The facility took years to make, and its destruction by the IDF will set them back probably at least a decade. In addition, Israel continues to seize or destroy large quantities of weapons. However, because Hamas has miles of undiscovered tunnels, along with Iran continuing to train the next generation of weapon producers, Israel still has a long way to go before it can truly say it has dismantled Hamas's ability to wage war. Bye for now.